G'day Eagles fans, welcome back to True Eagle. Just when I had started to feel very strongly that I was hating the trade period and all it represents and everything that comes with it, all the posturing between two clubs, in particular West Coast and Brisbane, and all the nauseating speculation about how the trades would go. We have our first deal done, just about. It hasn't been lodged. I don't know if the paperwork's been lodged, if that'll happen tomorrow, but I think it certainly has been reported in multiple places that it is a done deal. So we can assume these are the final details of the trade. So just to go through it quickly, West Coast did a three-way deal involving Brisbane and Fremantle. This must be the first time West Coast and Fremantle have been involved in the same trade in, I reckon, a quarter of a century. Close to, if I'm not mistaken. So the Eagles land Brandon Starcevich. We essentially give up pick 16, 22 and 23 to receive Starcevich 12, 33 and 52. So we come out of this deal with a higher pick than what we started with, and we land Brandon Starcevich whilst giving up 22 and 23 as well. So not what was expected. I think there was some posturing around whether West Coast would give up Hawthorn's pick, or we did that, or whether they give up the priority pick, which was, I think, 22 in this instance, and we did that as well. So obviously it didn't go as expected, and these things rarely do. So trying to work out how the deal is stacked in terms of favoritism, I think it's a fairly even trade. I think it basically equates to Starcevich being worth about pick 22. Essentially, we upgrade 16 to 12 and we downgrade 23 to 33. So it's done. And further pleasing news is the fact that Oscar Rowland's compo pick should be generated tomorrow, they reckon. Brisbane were doing this whole thing where they're holding off lodging the paperwork for Oscar Rowland, I think, as a bargaining tool against us. It's all very complicated. It would have been short-sighted anyway because their deadline for free agency is this coming Friday, and I think the idea is, they were going to hold off lodging it to maybe, throw us some doubt as to whether we were going to get picked 2, but, I mean, their contract offer to Oscar Allen would already pretty much be final anyway. Anyway, I don't care. We're just going to talk about what we have now and what could potentially happen next. Starcevich is a good recruit. Look, I mean, there's been a lot of conjecture around his concussions and his history around that. And I'm not going to lie, it makes me a bit uneasy, but I'm not going to sit here and also say that we've made a terrible mistake when I don't know the details. Obviously, this carries some risk for us. And, at the end of the day, what we essentially gave up was more or less generated out of thin air by the AFL to help us get it done. So I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it and just hope for the best. And that the best case scenario is Starcevich plays, a full and healthy career at West Coast. And he is a pretty damn good player, to be honest. It'd be interesting to consider the flow-on effects with our best 22 and where that leaves Brady Hoff, for instance, who has previously played that shutdown, small to medium-sized role. We've seen him play a bit in the midfield, but I suppose that's a topic for another day when we do our post-trade period best 22 video. So essentially, by tomorrow, our picks will be pick 1, pick 2, and it is being reported that pick 2 is the expected pick, so I'm going to assume it's that until tomorrow, and hopefully I don't have to make a video crying about how we didn't get pick 2. It's out of our control anyway. Pick 1, pick 2, pick 13, 34, 38, 53, 58. I'm pushing all those picks back by 1 because, of course, the Oscar Allen compo pick comes out of thin air, so it pushes every pick down. So we now need to consider what happens next and what impact does this have on our reported interest in trading up for Gold Coast pick 7, because it looks a little bit iffy as far as I'm concerned. So the trades that we know will come. Campbell Chester will get to Carlton. I thought they had pick 34. I don't know if they traded it or what. It is now pick 41. I must have missed that. I had 34 in my head. 41 is, it's the closest pick to what I thought was the reported offer or what West Coast was asking for. Pick 34 from Carlton. Pick 41 is the closest thing they have to that. Let's just assume it's that for the time being. To be honest, on value, it's probably about right. Campbell Chester does not have a lot of trade value, unfortunately. Liam Ryan will get done to St Kilda, I would imagine. I think looking at the picks that St Kilda have, they don't really have appropriate ones for us in this particular deal. I'm going to assume this is probably like a future second, so we can bank a future second as part of this deal with St Kilda. In other words, it's probably not going to affect our draft hand this year as far as I'm concerned, and if it does, it's probably in a bad way because it means we've gotten a really bad pick, which I'm not expecting. I also read today, it tweeted that pick 33 is considered a likely pick in a trade for Tyler Young. That will, of course, become 34, with Oscar Allen's compo pick pushing that back. And I'd imagine there'll probably be other compo picks as well, which is not ideal. But that is the game, and we're benefiting from it as well. So pick 34 for Tyler Young. I still think we could push for a cheaper deal there for a guy that's hasn't played a lot of footy. But at the same time, it's a weak draft, and I think he will exceed the value of pick 34. So let's just assume it's that for now. The other interesting thing about this Brisbane deal, it did not include Devon Robertson. I would have thought if West Coast and Brisbane were doing a deal for Devon Robertson, he would have just been tacked on to the end of this. The only reason I think he hasn't been is because my guess is West Coast are going to sign him to the rookie list. That is the only explanation I have for him not being wrapped up in this deal. Why would you not just get it done at the same time? So I suppose that's good news. I think that we don't have to give up even a solitary pick for Devon Robertson. I'd imagine it gets done. I don't think there's too much a doubt about that, but we were wrong 2 years ago when this happened. He has actually requested a trade now. That's the difference. Okay, so let's have a look at the Gold Coast deal and what is the flow and effect to this. So what I'm referring to, for those who have missed it, is West Coast are pretty openly interested in Gold Coast pick 6. It gets complicated. That now has become pick 7, or will become pick 7 by the time the Oscar Allen compensation pick comes through. They will have pick 7 and 8 in a row if they end up doing that deal for Sam Flanders, which, unless I've missed it, has not actually gone through, but we are expecting it to include what is pick 7, but will become pick 8. Either way, Gold Coast have 2 picks in a row, 7 and 8. And I reckon 7 is probably going to be used for Christian Petrarca. Ideally not both. If Gold Coast trade both of those picks, obviously we're out of the equation for trading up for one of those picks. So let's just hope that it's just the first one. 7 and 8 would be an outrageously generous offer for Christian Petrarca at his age. So let's say we're going for pick 7. What do we have to offer as trade capital to get that done? The only way it works is picks 13, 38, and 41, which we currently hold. That is, of course, the 12 that have been pushed back. In the draft points calculator, which will be relevant now to the Gold Coast Suns who are using this pick to match for academy, or using these points to match for an academy bid, that equals pick 7. Okay? So if we can trade 13, 38, and 41, package some picks up we're not going to use anyway, it's a shallow draft, we can move from 13 to 8 in the end. So just to repeat that, 13, 38, and 41 gets us pick 8, and it gives Gold Coast the equivalent of pick 7. Now, the only issue with this is there enough for Gold Coast to do that? Like, there will be other teams clamoring for pick 8, and the best we can possibly muster right now is 13, 38, and 41, which is the equivalent of pick 7. It gives them one extra pick. Now, you could, cynically say that maybe West Coast, which is against the rules anyway, but hypothetically, West Coast say, okay, we won't bid on either Zeke Uland or Dylan Patterson, and that will be beneficial to Gold Coast because it doesn't affect the points bid. So West Coast does have some leverage there. As far as I'm aware, that's against the rules to actually formally include that in negotiations, but there's not too much the AFL can do to actually regulate that. So we can hope that this is the best offer Gold Coast gets. It seems unlikely to me. So without getting too bogged down in all these hypotheticals, because we could be here all night, to be honest, one possibility that I've seen is that we could package Chesser and do an alternative deal with Carlton and potentially try and get their pick 22. Remembering again that Carlton is in the market for points rather than picks per se. Chesser and 35 could make their way to Carlton, and we could receive pick 22, which was their compensation for losing Jack Silvani. When you punch this into the draft points calculator, this gives you an equivalent of pick 33 for Campbell Chesser. So that's about the original asking price anyway. It's probably a favourable deal for us if we get 35 up to 22 for the cost of Campbell Chesser. So then you look again at the Gold Coast deal. Pick 13 and 22 actually equal pick 6 on the draft points indicator, or whatever, the value index, whatever it's called. So we've actually improved our offer there for pick 6. This is just an alternative deal, a way we can more confidently bank on getting a Gold Coast pick. Obviously, we're going to have to negotiate with multiple clubs at once, and I'm not paid enough to really go through it much deeper than this, but I think there's multiple ways we can potentially get pick 6, or what is actually going to be pick 8 from the Gold Coast Suns. So where does that leave us? I've hypothetically done the Campbell Chesser deal to Carlton, and I've done that deal with the Gold Coast Suns. What are we actually left with here? We've got picks 1, 2, 8, and then nothing until 52 and 58, which, one of them will be Banfield, and the other one could be used to pick up or match a bid for an academy talent. Honestly, I would be surprised if any of our academy talents get bid on, but it is distinctly possible. I won't go through the actual trade, but another hypothetical possibility here is we could also target Carlton's pick 9 with the Chesser deal. How will we do that? Well, we'd have to give them some points. We also have St Kilda's future second, which we may or may not receive. It's again hypothetical. That's why I don't want to go too deep into this. But it is a possibility. Could we target Carlton's pick 9 that they got for losing TDK? I think it's possible. I think that actually becomes pick 10 after the Oscar Allen deal. But I'm just going to throw that out there. I won't get deep into that. It's confusing enough doing this video anyway. Let's go back to the fact that we have 1, 2, 8, and then a couple of picks in the 50s. Is that the best we can do? I would have loved 4 picks in the first round. Can we manufacture another one? Now, the only other way I think we can get this done is in the hypothetical scenario, Essendon really want pick 1. Okay, that would involve splitting pick 1 to move down the order to get Essendon's 2 picks, which would be 5 and 6. Now, pick 1 for 5 and 6, it's not going to happen. It's just not realistic. Why am I saying pick 1 and not pick 2? I think realistically, and I don't actually have any inside information here, but I can't imagine Essendon's interest for pick 2 being that strong when presumably they're interested in Willem Dersma. There has been some suggestion they want to reunite all 3 Dersma brothers, and the only way to do that is to get pick 1. And, I don't know if West Coast agrees with me. I don't really care if we have pick 1 or 2 in this particular draft. I would prefer 4 picks in that top dozen or so. That's just my opinion, and we're just hypothetically speculating as to what could happen. So would Essendon be interested in moving up to pick 1? I have no idea. I could understand why not. Because, in theory, they could wait till Willem Dersma spends 3 years at West Coast, try and get him when they've already got Zane and they've got Xavier. That would probably be the strategy I would use. But this is a hypothetical scenario, okay? So we're just speculating about what it might look like. Again, I think Essendon, if we're going to take 5 and 6 off them for pick 1, obviously we have to give something back. I think this deal only possibly works if Zach Merritt leaves Essendon. Because I can't imagine a world where Essendon is happy having pick 1 and then pick 20. They would want 2 picks in the top 10, if I had to guess. That's me trying to get in their heads, right? So if Merritt leaves to Hawthorn, that actually generates them pick 9 as well, which might make them more amenable to a deal for 5 and 6. We're getting very complicated here, aren't we? But we have to just assume for this hypothetical that Essendon are actually interested in pick 1. So what would that look like? What would it look like to get 5 and 6 off Essendon? It has to be pick 1, and we don't have any other picks outside the top 8. And I don't think 1 and 8 for 5 and 6 is a very good deal. In fact, it would be the worst deal this club has ever done, and I don't think it will happen. So we'd have to trade in the futures market. I think the best offer we could potentially muster right now, in this scenario anyway, is 1 and St Kilda's future second, or even our own future second. Bearing in mind we have St Kilda's from Liam Ryan, so we're pretty deep in this hypothetical now. 1, 2 and 8, or 2, 5, 6 and 8. I know which one I would prefer, and that would be the 4 picks inside the top 8 selections with a couple of picks in the 50s later. That gets you one of Sullivan Roby or Dyson Sharp at pick 2, and then you're looking at guys like Josh Lindsay, Lockie Doverston, Threadgold, Mitch Marsh, Xavier Taylor. These are some really good talents that I think would be really suitable for us, and I don't think we really have an appetite for taking Willem Dersma personally. I don't think we should. That's my opinion. It's not that he's not a good player, I just don't think he's right for us. And this is really about mapping about all the possibilities. What is the best draft hand we can muster? Alternatively, it's pick 1 for 5 and 20. 1 for 5 and 6 would never get done, but 1 for 5 and 20 would get done. That would leave us with 2, 5, 8, and 20. So I've gone really deep into this hypothetical. I really hope this was clear and you were able to keep up. But essentially, just going back to where we sit, we're in a good position somewhat to deal with the Gold Coast Suns for pick 8. We're not in a really strong position, but we're in a decent one, and it probably does rely on us not overpaying for Tyler Young. I think if the pick in the 30s is fine, whether that's 34 or 38, maybe we can push to trade 38 instead, and generating the best possible deal for Campbell Chesser, which could involve upgrading to 22, but we'll see over the next few days. Other Eagles news quickly. I saw that we have ruled out a move for Jack Steele. Not surprised at all by that. I thought it would have been suitable. But I suppose I agree with Dylan, who said the other day on the True Footy YouTube channel, you probably don't need Dev Robertson, Jack Steele, and Finley McRae. On a related note, we have met with Finley McRae and Harry Schonberg as well from the Adelaide Crows. Both of these players were D-listees, both top 25 picks. I think Finn was a first round pick a few years ago, 2020, I think it was 2020, has been delisted, as has Harry Schonberg. What these guys have in common is that they are ready-made inside midfielders to go with Devon Robertson as well. I think these guys really are probably attempts to bolster the midfield depth. Absolutely, we need that. We don't have enough full-time midfielders on the list. We're probably getting a few extras to try and hope that one of them comes good. Roll the dice a few times, bearing in mind we have 4 extra rookie list spots, and this is where these guys would go. I now believe Devon Robertson gets to the rookie list based on the fact he wasn't included in the original trade today. Finley McRae, Harry Schonberg, I doubt we sign all 3 of them, but we're at least having interviews with them. I read as well, somebody commented on social media that Mitch Cleary said on Agenda Setters that West Coast did seek out Rowan Marshall and have an attempt there to get him. Obviously, we have a need for a ruck. He's already requested a trade to Geelong. I think that's a fair way down the track, and it makes sense. Why would you pick us when you can go to Geelong as their number 1 ruck? But it does signal an interest in getting a ruckman. This is something we have talked about on this channel. We've had nothing to suggest we were actually chasing one at this point. This is the first time we've heard it. We had an attempt at Rowan Marshall. I presume we were unsuccessful. I'd imagine we don't twist that the other way anytime soon. But that would be very interesting considering we're already dealing with St Kilda this offseason. We have also reached out to Oscar Smart, who was a mid-season draftee that got delisted by Essendon recently as a potential train-on player in the summer. Whether or not that's changed, because I heard that information secondhand, that was before West Coast got its 4 extra rookie list spots, so maybe he's another contender for that spot. We know we've heard about Tom Blamires as well, another smaller inside midfielder who would come in and be depth as well. So I think that's all I've got in terms of a stock take of where we're at. We've gone heavy on the hypotheticals. I guess I'm hoping for 3 to 4 picks in the top 12. This is where I think the best value is in this year's draft. If one of those picks is actually 20, that's okay too. But we're in a pretty good position because ultimately we've had 3 established players, leave: Chesser, Ryan, and Allen. We've had 3 request trades in. That's Starcevich, that's Tyler Young, that's Dev Robertson. To be honest, on raw talent, we've lost more than we've gained there, in my opinion. But we have done it cheaply. We've extracted maximum value. If Oscar Allen does generate pick 2, and really what we've got to focus on after this is the draft, and that is essentially how we're going to build our list, whilst we've added some depth in some really important positions. So that's all I've got. I've just vomited all that to you. Guys, let me know in the comments what you think. If you haven't seen it, on the True Footy YouTube channel, my other YouTube channel, we had a discussion around what West Coast should do this offseason. Obviously, that has now been changed a little bit by the Starcevich deal going through in a different way to what we expected, but it's content. It's up there if you want to see it on True Footy. Let me know what you think of the trade, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.